And I work here on Mark Kelly's campaign. And thank you all for joining us this evening. So we are really appreciative of all of your support, and we have a great event coming up. We're especially excited to be welcoming Mayor Pete and Chasten fundraiser. Before I turn it over to Mark and the mayor and Chasten, I have a few housekeeping items for everyone. During the program, your microphones and videos will be turned off so other guests cannot see or hear you. But after the speaking program, we will open it up for Q&A. So if you think of a question for Mark during the program, please submit it in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And then if at any time during the program you need to speak to our staff, you can do so during the chat function at the bottom of your screen in that same toolbar as well. And we can message you and answer any questions. And as a reminder, this is a private event, so we do have a policy of no photos or video recordings this evening, as well as a policy of no social media. And finally, I did want to give a special thank you to all of our event sponsors that helped build for this event to make it a big success. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to turn it over to our candidate, Mark Kelly and Gabby Giffords.
Hello, everybody. It took a while to get that unmuted. It's like harder than flying the space shuttle. Actually, no, it isn't. But hey, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. Mayor Pete, Chasten, thank you so much for being part of this event. Thank you for all the sponsors out there. I know these things are not easy. You got to make a lot of phone calls, but this is such an important election, not just for winning a Senate seat in Arizona and giving me the opportunity to serve in the United States Senate, but potentially there are other things, and I imagine we'll get to that in the Q&A, that are potentially at risk here. Arizona is also a battleground state for the presidency. So the ability for our team to run the best race possible also helps the top of the ticket. And we feel that Vice President Biden and Senator Harris can get across the finish line here. And this could be the key to getting 270 electoral votes and winning that election as well. So a lot going on here in the state of Arizona. We'll have an opportunity to talk about that. But first, I want to introduce Mayor Pete and Chasten. Mayor Pete, former presidential candidate, ran a fantastic race. I really learned a lot from him watching his candidacy. Helped me as I'm running for the U.S. Senate, and then Chasten as well. Chasten, I've been so in both roles. You know, I've been the spouse of the candidate, and now I'm the candidate. And Gabby's been the candidate. Now she's the spouse of the candidate.
Yeah.
So
as one political spouse to both, I have to say I am very excited to support Gabby's husband for Senate. I would love the T-shirt if they're available. But we both are really happy to be here with both of you this evening, and we don't have to tell you how personal this election is, not just for Peter and I, as queer Americans, just for all of us. Gabby, you specifically, I felt sort of the weight of your leadership, sort of guided by how you stick up for things that you believe in as I was out on the campaign trail. This is really personal for all of us, and I'm thinking especially about the epidemic of gun violence in this country, and as a teacher, what that felt like running our own lockdown drills at school. And I'm tired of terrorizing kids in this country with lockdown drills. We've already talked about it a little bit. I think everyone understands the weight, the severity of the Supreme Court and the shape of the Supreme Court and what's at stake in our personal lives. As somebody who has a family member, my mother has been battling cancer for the last 13 years. We understand how weighty and important making sure every American has healthcare is. And Peter and I will do everything that we can to make sure that you see a victory this fall. Mark, we can't wait. And I'm going to let Peter continue talking about how important it is just to make sure that we keep Arizona blue.
Well, we're like Chasten said, we couldn't be prouder and more energized about being part of this. I'm flashing back to my first job out of college when we had a T-shirt that said "Turn Arizona Blue," and we very nearly did when I was working on the campaign back in 2004. When Gabby Giffords was already distinguishing herself as one of the rising figures in the Democratic Party in Arizona, when John McCain was the senator from Arizona and was considered to be kind of a prime example of what a Republican was like. And when Mark Kelly was gearing up to go back to the International Space Station, and what a different world we live in. But what hasn't changed are the ways in which our lives are shaped by these decisions that are being made and that are about to be made. I'm more convinced than ever that the 2020s is set up to go down in history as the deciding decade for this whole century of American life. And the decisive moment for that deciding decade is upon us. It's not even election day, really. It's voting season as the different states get into their vote by mail and early vote calendars. And all eyes are on Arizona right now, especially with the significance of an election that might deliver Mark to the Senate before any of the other senators elected are sworn in. Something that's taken on, of course, new importance and new weight, given the loss of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg that we learned about on Friday. So every time it feels like the stakes couldn't get any higher, right? The world serves up something, fate serves up something that reminds us that it's even bigger than we thought. And that's how I feel every time I think about the US Senate. But that's why we're here. And I think we could have a lot to celebrate in just a few weeks, both nationally and specifically to Arizona. So I want to thank everybody on this call, our phenomenal co-hosts. I see a lot of veterans of Pete for America, and it's wonderful to be reunited with you and to see you joining us in this. And no matter where you were in the presidential primary, I'm so glad we're all on the same team right now. And it's just never been more important. So that's why we're here, and that's why I can't wait to place a celebratory phone call in a few weeks.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chasten. I think we have some time for some questions. I've got some questions for you. I think you've got a few from me. So let me start, Mayor. I served in the Navy for a long time, 25 years, and it really shaped my outlook on what public service means, how important it is to be a public servant. As a combat veteran yourself in the United States Army, by the way, my dad served in the Army, so I also really like the Army. How did serving in the Army shape your view of public service?
So I should qualify that they stuck me in an Army job, but I was doing it as a Navy guy. So I'm with you on the right side of that rivalry, and so admire your military service as well. And as you know, I should state that yours was a much more distinguished and senior military career than mine. But as I learned from my experience in Afghanistan and even being in my reserve unit stateside, the biggest thing is the trust that you form with other people, trusting your lives to people you barely know and that you don't have much in common with besides that flag on your shoulder. And a moment like this where we're being torn apart by the very person whose job it is to bring us together, I think we have a chance to come together and try to replicate that spirit of service. Maybe the military isn't for everybody, but some form or fashion or spirit of service, I think, could really bring us together. And it's one of the things that's drawn me to your campaign, and part of how I think we're going to get out of this mess where people seem less and less likely to trust each other, let alone our institutions.
Well, thank you. So we're coming down to crunch time here, and I think if you have a question for me, we can go back and forth.
Yeah, I did want to put it to you just because I know a lot of folks, some folks have been following the blow by blow and some are just tuning in, but I think it'd be great just to hear how it feels for you on the ground. Like, how does it feel to you that the campaign is going? What do you make of, you tell you as a candidate early on, don't get too wrapped up in the polls, but you've got data, you've got a gut feel. What's it feel like out there?
Yeah, so I've been at this for over a year and a half. I announced in February of 2019, which is probably before you announced you were running for president. Really rather early in this whole cycle. So I've been doing this a while. It's been going well, and you're right, the polls, I think they give you a sense of where we are. It feels pretty good, but it's going to get a lot tighter. I mean, there is no doubt that Mitch McConnell, I'm convinced, and Senator McSally both do not want to lose 2 Senate seats in Arizona in 24 months. It's been 67 years since there's been 2 Democrats in the US Senate from Arizona at the same time. 67 years. When Kirsten Sinema won, that was the first Democrat elected to the Senate in over 25 years. There's a lot of motivation on their side not to give up. So they're not going to give up easily. And the stakes just went way up because if elected, I will likely, if there aren't any legal challenges, I'll likely be seated in the US Senate at the end of November or the beginning of December, a full month before anybody else that happens to win a Senate seat. So this could be, part of the whole, process of confirming a Supreme Court justice if things turn out a certain way. But we're feeling pretty good. We expect to have a very high turnout election. We did in 2018. The motivation just seems, despite being in the middle of a pandemic, there's an incredible amount of energy and motivation. Now, I hope it's all on our side because that's the only thing I get a real sense of. But it feels pretty good. But this could still go either way. It's not gonna be easy over the next 6 weeks. They're not gonna give up. So let me ask you this, Mayor. What advice do you have for me over the last 6 weeks? You've run some tough campaigns. You had a tough campaign for mayor. So we're down to crunch time. What do I need to know?
I'd be humbled to give you advice. The only reason I even wound up in politics was I couldn't figure out how to become an astronaut. And you're doing so well out there. The only thing I would say is that more than ever, I think this is a time to always be coming back to our lived experience. The gap I find sometimes between the questions you'll get from the commentators in the press and the questions you'll get from the voters can be pretty big. And always making sure you're tuned in with what's really driving into people's lives who just want to know if they're going to be okay. I think is more important than ever. The other thing, of course, is that really matters who's at your side, and by that measure, you're in fantastic shape as well. So I don't have to tell you how to win a Senate seat, but I'm sure excited to be in your corner as you go forth and do it. And on that question of kind of how we connect up our campaigns with people's lives, I'd love to learn a little more about the top legislative priorities that define your campaign and that are the biggest things you'd want to sink your teeth into when you arrive in the Senate.
Well, so pre-COVID-19, if you go back to last year, as I traveled around the state, the thing I heard by far most about, I'm sure it was your same experience running for president, is about healthcare. If you've got a pre-existing condition, lifetime caps, being able to, folks used to get kicked off of their insurance when they got sick. I mean, these things really affect people personally and often in a major negative way. I've met so many moms and dads out there who have kids that have healthcare issues. Sometimes they can't afford their prescription medication, or they're making horrible choices between, mom's prescription medication, the kids, or buying groceries for the week. I mean, those are real problems that folks have all across the state. And that's still a real thing. I mean, this pandemic has highlighted a lot of the inequities in our healthcare system and that things have to be fixed. And it's still too expensive for people. Co-pays, deductibles, premiums, prescription medication. So that's going to be high on my priority list. But I also want to focus on stuff where, there's still a need here with, unemployment insurance expiring, small businesses are struggling. So it's addressing those immediate concerns. But as a U.S. Senator, I want to also focus on things where I think I could be helpful, considering my background, serving in the Navy for 25 years and having a engineering, science sort of background. So I think I might gravitate to that stuff too. Climate change is a big one. We've got major water issues in our state. We get 39% of our water from the Colorado River. Lake Mead and Lake Powell are below 50% capacity right now. We wind up in this drought contingency here next year, maybe the year after. We've got to cut back by 18% of our water in the Colorado that we get from the Colorado. That's a big deal to the state. I mean, there are farmers, especially, that are really going to struggle. They'll start pumping groundwater at a really high rate. And then we wind up with subsidence issues. The land starts to collapse. we've got significant water, and these are, engineering problems. So I'm excited about being involved in that. I got a question for Chasten though.
Uh-oh.
So Chasten, what did campaigning for Pete mean to you? And, what was it like to be, you were really a surrogate on the stump for your husband on the campaign trail. I imagine it was much different at the end than it was in the beginning. What was that transition like?
Yeah. Shameful plug. I guess that's why I wanted to write a book about it, because I was never political. I did not grow up political, and there was often in the first few months of the campaign trail this feeling of, imposter syndrome. Like people like me don't belong in these types of conversations or arenas. And then I realized you don't have to be a certain person to politics. What people really want, and as you're figuring out or already know, it's so personal. Politics is just personal. And they want to know that you see them, that you get them, and that you're going to go to Washington to fight for them. And so I just talked about what was at stake for me, growing up gay in conservative Northern Michigan, running away from home, and what that feels like to live in a country where you contemplate whether or not you belong. Watching mom battle her cancer, being a teacher in an American classroom where you feel like you don't have the respect or the pay that you deserve, right? And voters just want to know that you get it. And so going out there talking to Pete, I didn't do it because I felt obligated to. I felt like we needed to claim this moment. And I stood in front of people not out of obligation, but I felt as necessity, because this moment is so important. And I also got to meet amazing people along the way. I feel like if you spend all day on social media or Twitter, it can feel like the world is just a terrible, awful place. But then you go out there and you meet people who are just doing the work. You've probably seen it all across Arizona, people who just roll up their sleeves and want to do good. I remember this lady in the middle of Iowa who ran an after-school theater program. I'm a theater teacher myself. But what she was also doing was sort of running like an underground LGBTQ center, because in the middle of Iowa, these kids had no safe space to go. And there are people like that all across our country who are just committed to making it a great place. And some of those people I got to meet, I sat next to across the aisle from Gabby at a debate, and I was sort of fangirling a little bit. I was just so excited to meet you. I've really admired you. And Gabby, I just want to ask, like I mentioned, it can feel so bleak, but how do you maintain your very positive outlook and optimism?
I want to make the world a better place.
That's Gabby since the first day I met her.
Yes.
No matter where we were, what we were doing, just trying to do her best to improve things for Arizona and our country.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Mayor. So I know that you and Chasten have been working overtime to help Democrats up and down the ballot, and that is so important. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that Next Era is doing?
Yeah, so what's really important to us is never to get caught treating the presidency like it's the only office that matters. Yes, there's a titanic struggle that's so important to bring an end to the Trump era, but we know that the future hinges on what happens in other races and other levels of leadership, especially in the pandemic era. We've seen the importance of local leadership, so we're investing in local leaders. We've seen the importance of state house leadership, and even these state constitutional offices you don't hear about much. We're supporting a state auditor, for example, candidate. And folks who want to know more, wintheera.com is the website. Anthony or a team member of ours might throw it in the chat box now. But it's so important to us to be doing what we are here. I'm used to working with a certain toolkit. First, the toolkit of being in office, and then the tools that you have as a candidate. But one of the things that I've seen with Giffords Courage, for example, is that there's a whole other power that you can gather through the work that is done as a group, not necessarily even before the first vote is cast or before you have the levers of government available to you. You can make such a difference, and so it's in that tradition that Win the Era is seeking to have an impact. And speaking of impact, I'd love to know a little more, Mark, just from how you came to public service. You're no stranger to public service as a military officer, as an astronaut, but elected office is a little different. So how did you make that leap, decide to make that jump into running for elected office?
Well, I would often get asked about it, especially in the last 8 years since I've lived here in Arizona. And it's not something I wanted to do. I mean, it wasn't like the thing, like when I was a little kid, I wanted to be, I remember telling my dad I was about 7 years old that I wanted to be an astronaut. And he said, son, there aren't many of them and they're really smart. So, something I didn't consider for a while. Uh, but it wasn't even on my list as a kid. But as I've traveled across the state and met more folks and learned about the issues that they were dealing with, and then saw over the last 3 years the trajectory that our country has found itself on. And I know a little bit about trajectories, and this one is not good. This is not good at all. And then it was the night before the election in 2018, literally the night before, to get out the vote effort. Gabby and I are downtown Phoenix and at a place called the Van Buren, on like Van Buren and Central, I guess. And this younger woman came up to me, and she wasn't much older than my eldest daughter, who's 25. She might have been 27, 28. She's pretty young. And she said to me, she said, my son, and she knew who I was. So she leans over and she says, hey, my son has Down syndrome. And I'm terrified he's going to lose his health insurance. Would you please consider running for the US Senate? So I said, yes, I will consider it. And then it was about 6 weeks later that we started taking the first steps after I thought about it for a while. And that mom and so many like her and dads across the country they're just worried about their kids. Like somebody in Washington, D.C. is going to do something to take away the kid's health insurance because of his pre-existing condition, because this kid was born with Down syndrome. So, I realized at that point, the stakes are really high and this was very personal. So it was basically, I'm not so sure I'd be sitting here if it wasn't for her. Chasten, I know this is on a lot of people's minds right now, so I'm curious to get your take on this. The future of the Supreme Court. So how do you think the LGBTQ community right now is, feeling with the impact of this recent news? And, how would you like to see us building LGBTQ equalities via the court? And what comes next? Like, what's your whole take on this?
Oof, we don't have enough time. I think we all want to believe that we live in a country where we can package up LGBT equality and and say we did it, we got there, and put it on the shelf of achievements, and it's not true. There are still so many vulnerable people in the LGBTQ community who felt left out before this president was even elected. It starts with restoring leadership to Washington, a president who actually believes in LGBTQ plus equality, a Senate of people who are committed to making sure that we are enacting legislation that not only validates the dignity and worth in human rights, basic human rights for the LGBTQ plus community, but people who are going there wanting to make sure that we enact legislation to make it better. And I think about a lot of those kids in rural America who, don't have barely any support at the local level, the state level, or even the federal level, to feel like they can go to school and be themselves, to live in a community where it's okay to love the person that you want to love. I mean, my husband won Iowa when he ran for president, and there are still pockets of this country I feel unsafe holding his hands. So we have a long ways to go to make sure that everyone feels safe in this country. That the ground floor, I think, is just empathetic leadership. And you, Mark, will save a lot of lives just by being elected to office and being a senator from the state of Arizona, telling young queer people in Arizona that I see you, I respect you, and I'm going to fight for you. Because a lot of people right now in the community are wondering, is anyone even going to fight for me? Is there any fight left? How much do we stand to lose?
Mhm.
And you will be very lucky, I hope, when you're in that position and people start sharing those stories with you, right? Like that mom shared her story with you, like we've experienced on the trail, of what leadership means to people when they're going about their everyday lives and they wonder, does my life have worth? But if I can steal the mic just one more time, because I think I would want to spend an hour talking to Gabby, but I have a lot of questions for you, Gabby. In life, we often reinvent and change ourselves based on personal choices or outside circumstances. Is your recovery a process of discovering a new Gabby Giffords or a fight to reclaim the old Gabby Giffords?
The new one, better, stronger, tougher.
Yes.
I don't know if Gabby can get any tougher.
No.
Yeah.
She's pretty tough. She now has a mean left hook.
Boom.
Well, hey, I know we're getting a little over here. We're running out of time. I really appreciate both of you being here today to help out. We've got 40 something days to go. I don't even know. I'm not counting right now. Once we get under like 30 days, I'll probably start counting. But we got a long way to go here, and this is going to take a big effort by thousands of people across the state. We are making hundreds of thousands of phone calls, probably millions by the time we get done here. So it's a big get out the vote effort. As a Democrat here in the state of Arizona, you got to really put together a big coalition to win an election, and we're doing that. And this is all part of it, having the resources available. So Mayor Pete, Chasten, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to meeting you because you guys have met in person and I'm like the odd person out. I look forward to meeting you in person here at some point.
Our love to you both.
Thanks so much for your leadership. We're proud to be with both of you. And again, can't wait to see that victorious result in November. And thanks to everybody on the call for helping make that possible. And stay tuned because you'll hear more about what you can do to make sure we have a victory there. But so glad to be at your side.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Now, well, Mark, Gabby, I think you have a few more words for the folks still on the call. We'll keep going, and then we'll have another little bit of Q&A after they hear from you. And as a reminder, we've gotten a lot of questions in the Q&A button down at the bottom. So if you have any more, keep them coming. They're great. We'll get them all in the queue.
We'll go quickly, Lydia, so we can get to the questions. So over to you, Gabby Giffords.
This election is so important. Lowering drug prices, raising the middle class wages, protecting Medicare and Social Security. It's all at stake. That's why I'm here to support my husband, Mark Kelly. Mark focuses on facts, not politics. Mark is loyal and caring. Mark has already served our country in so many ways. Now we need him in the Senate. Thank you for being here today. It means so much to me, Mark. This is so important for Arizona, for our country. We cannot do it alone. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Gabby.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us. It was really great to see Mayor Buttigieg and Chasten. It was great having them on this call. I also want to just take a moment to, I think it's important that we all acknowledge the passing of Justice Ginsburg. Justice Ginsburg dedicated her life to making our country more just. She fought cancer with the same ferocity that she fought for all of us and fought for civil rights. And she left a legacy that impacted women's rights and equal protection under the law. And she's going to continue to be a role model for so many. I know she was a hero, not only to me, but to Gabby. She was one of Gabby's biggest heroes.
Yes.
I'll never forget the time Gabby and I were in DC and Gabby sees Justice Ginsburg across the National Cathedral. And I don't think I've seen you move so fast. I thought you were going to tackle her. That was pretty quick.
Yeah.
And that's the only time I think either of us have met RBG, but it was very exciting. We're going to fight. We're going to fight to honor her legacy and continue to fight for equality. And when it comes to making a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court, I don't think Washington should rush that process for politics, for political purposes. Now, I believe that people elected to the presidency and the Senate in November should fill this vacancy to the Supreme Court. You know, it's never been clearer that we're at a critical moment for our country. And what we're facing right now is different than anything we've ever faced before. We've got a public health crisis and an economic crisis. But more than that, we have a major crisis of leadership. But I can't tell you how unexpected it is for me to even be here today, because I never thought I would be the one running for the United States Senate. It was always clear to me that Gabby was the member of Congress in our family. And I often think to myself, if something would have happened to me, if I was the person who would have become injured, would Gabby have become an astronaut?
Yes.
Now she's,
Yes.
are you sure?
Yes.
She's pretty sure. I'm not so sure. But, you know, since we launched this campaign just over a year and a half ago, we've accomplished a lot. But with 42 days to go and 15 days till Arizonans start voting, a lot of stuff can happen. Not all of it good. We have a lot of money being spent here on TV ads and radio and digital ads. Over $80 million has been spent or committed. And the Senate Leadership Fund, which is a Republican outside group, I believe, controlled by Senator McConnell, just announced that they're going to invest $10.6 million here. But they made that announcement like 3 weeks ago. I imagine that's going to change here in the coming weeks. This has been one of the most expensive Senate races in the country. On track, well, not on track. This will be the most expensive election ever in the history of Arizona, and by a good margin. In 2018, $120 million was spent here on the Senate race. And it was a close race. Senator Sinema beat Senator McSally by 2.4 percentage points. We expect this to be just as close. The stakes are, I guess you could argue the stakes are even higher. We know Mitch McConnell doesn't want to lose twice in 2 years in Arizona. And millions of dollars of attack ads have already come our way, not going to stop until Election Day. So it's important that we're prepared. And your support helps us do that. So we're working hard to communicate our message, to get folks registered to vote, to sign them up to vote by mail. That's a very popular thing here. 80% of people vote by mail here in Arizona. We need to fully fund our voter outreach programs before voting starts on October 9th or so, 9th or 10th. And if elected, my plan is to bring an approach that relies on science and data and facts to Washington. I think it's something we badly need. And this pandemic has pushed our healthcare system really to the brink, and it's really devastated the economy. And I think people are really worried about what the future looks like. And I feel we deserve folks that'll work in an independent way to solve some of these problems. And when you consider what happened last week with the vacancy at the Supreme Court with RBG passing, you know, the stakes on healthcare just went way up. So there's a lot to do. We've got to drive down the cost of prescription drugs, defend protections for Arizonans and Americans who have pre-existing conditions. We've got to help small businesses. We need to reinvest in STEM education and make sure young people have the skills they need, whether or not they're heading off to college. And then we also have to protect Social Security and Medicare benefits that seniors have earned from a lifetime of work. Now, this is not going to be easy, but I think we can do this. We can win this election. We can build a stronger future for our country. But we need a lot of help. Now, I've flown in space 4 times. I've flown in combat 39 times. Never once did I do that by myself. So thank you for being here. This election in this state, the state of Arizona, could be the one that helps determine control of the United States Senate. But we need a lot of help still, all the way to election day. So thank you, everybody, and look forward to taking some of your questions.
All righty, Mark, we got a lot of great questions in the queue right now. First one comes from Art Almquist. He says, I know you touched a little bit on this before, but Mark, Arizona's Senate race has come up in recent coverage around the Supreme Court vacancy created by the passing of Justice Ginsburg. Can you talk about how your race could play into it?
Well, so I think that the key thing to remember here in Arizona is this is a special election. That's what makes us different. One of the Georgia elections, I think, is a special election, but when somebody is seated in the United States Senate, often has to do with state laws. And if elected after the election and after the canvass is complete and the election is certified, because I was elected, not appointed, the idea is that I would take office there at the end of November or the beginning of December. So if the Senate confirmation of whoever the president nominates for the Supreme Court, if that wound up being, that confirmation vote happened to be in December, it's something in theory that I could vote on. And this is going to be, likely approved or not on a very narrow margin. So that's why Arizona is ground zero for not only control of the United States Senate, maybe deciding factor on who wins the presidency because we're a battleground state, but also now is part of the conversation anyway for how this nominating process turns out for the Supreme Court.
Thanks so much for that question, Art. Moving right along, we have a question from Sharon Dodson. She asks, Mark and Gabby, you have worked as advocates for common sense gun control. Mark, what would you like to see the US Senate do in the next Congress on this issue?
Background checks.
That would be the first thing, what Gabby just said, background checks for all gun sales. There's a bill in the US House of Representatives, it's HR 8. Right now, most gun sales in the US are completed, the transactions completed after a federal background check, most.
5 minutes.
And it takes 5 minutes. Not all of them, it might be anywhere between 20 and 40% are not done with a background check. Doesn't make a lot of sense. That means if you're a prohibited purchaser, you could still go buy a gun from a private seller. And, as long as the private seller doesn't know that he's selling it to a felon, and how would he without a background check, he's really not committing a crime. So we should close those loopholes. Stronger domestic violence legislation is also important to protect women and families from gun violence. On top of that, there should be an investment in research to deal with gun violence as a public health issue. And then there's some other things, common sense stuff.
Right. Thank you so much for that question, Sharon. Moving right along, we have one from Alex Scott. They ask, Mark, climate change is having an observable effect on our country. What would you do as a senator to address this growing threat?
Very observable effect, and it affects different places in different ways. If you live in the Pacific Northwest right now, Oregon, Northern California, this is manifesting itself in just drier summers and more wildfires and neighborhoods often with hundreds, if not thousands of homes being burned to the ground. Here in the state of Arizona, we just had our hottest July, maybe August as well, in both Tucson and Phoenix. Record number of days in Phoenix over 110 degrees. I think the old record was about 30 days. Now it's over 50. Just blew the doors off of the record. What that means here is less water. So it's a big issue. If you live on the Gulf Coast of the United States, you're seeing more frequent and more powerful hurricanes. We've got to address this problem. We can't wait another decade or two, and we got to get off of fossil fuels. I think the sad thing about this is we know what we have to do, and it's also really not that hard to do it. Because of investments in solar, the solar capacity of our country has increased like 50% every single year for a while now. We should be able to accelerate that. and have a renewable energy economy and stop putting so much carbon in the atmosphere. And for the state of Arizona, it could be a good thing. We could create the technology here, we could build it here, we could deploy it here, create good jobs. We just have to make a decision to do this. But you have to get the climate deniers out of the United States Congress.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, a guy who walks onto the House or Senate floor with a snowball and claims climate change isn't real doesn't understand much about science.
Right. No, very, very salient issue here, especially in Arizona. Our next question comes from Benet Hilton Spiegel. Benet asks, Mark, in light of our beloved Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death, how will you fight to protect choice in the US Senate?
Woo!
Well, thank you, Benet, for your question. Sometimes I wonder why this is even like a discussion in the United States Senate. Why electing somebody to office? Why does that give them the right to make decisions that have to do with a woman's health care that should be between her and her doctor and maybe her family? So if I'm elected to the U.S. Senate, I believe that that these decisions should be between her and her family to the benefit of her and her family. And really shouldn't, be up to the United States Senate, but I'm going to be there to protect a woman's right to choose whether she continues a pregnancy or not. In Benet, here in Arizona, where we both live, 3 out of 4 people believe that that should be an option that all women have, regardless of whether they would make the decision to terminate a pregnancy themselves. So I'll fight for that. If we wind up with a court that is a 6-3 conservative court, I think Roe v. Wade is at risk. So this is something we're going to have to figure out, and we're going to have to fight for these rights that women and Americans have fought so hard for such a long period of time.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that question, Benet. Our next question is we have a question from someone that folks on this call might be familiar with. Historian Ron Chernow is curious about the evolution of Arizona from a red state to a purple state and possibly to a blue state. What are the forces driving this, Mark?
So Ron, thank you for your question. Both Gabby and I have both read your book on Hamilton, and we're also embarrassed to say that we went to see the musical way too many times, like double digits. It's kind of sad, actually. But we're big fans. So, Arizona always had like a little bit of a libertarian streak to it to begin with. So I wouldn't say it was always your normal red state, right? John McCain, Barry Goldwater. But the latest transition from red to purple to blue, I mean, first of all, Ron, who gives out the colors? I don't know. Who's the person in Washington, D.C. that distributes the colors? I haven't met that person yet. But what's happening here, let me just say a couple things. So we've got a lot of folks that moved from California. That has changed voter registration a little bit. We've got a lot of independents. 1/3 of Arizonans are registered independents. And we have a lot of young people that come from out of state that go to school here at ASU and U of A, and then often stay because they like it, because it's a great state. And we've got all these, we've got the Grand Canyon, we've got great weather, except when it's really hot. So we've had a lot of folks moving here from both the East and West Coast. And I think that has been the primary driver. Phoenix and Maricopa County is the fastest growing county in the country. It's also half the population of the state. So it's that immigration here. But if we don't tackle climate change, that immigration at some point is going to go in the other direction. So we've got to address that.
Got it. Thanks so much for that question, Ron. Really appreciate it. Moving along, Mark, a few people have asked, A couple of people, actually, they've asked about the polling and the TV ads in our race. How can our team counterattack these ads?
Well, we do. You know, we are a data-driven campaign, and that's why if you've seen polling lately, we generally show that you know, you'll see public polling that generally has us ahead. Hopefully, it stays ahead all the way to election day. That would be good. You know, countering attack ads, it's kind of an interesting thing. Well, first of all, Senator McSally decided to run the same campaign that she ran last time, which is a lot of false negative attacks. I think voters are tired of it. The response to those shouldn't be me doing the same thing at her. That's, first of all, I don't want to do it, but it's also probably not the smartest thing to do if you want to win an election. And it's not working for her for now. That could change. It helps when we can go out there and say, hey, independent fact checkers have checked all this information and has been found to be false, misleading, lies. I mean, that's from the Arizona Daily Star, the newspaper here in Tucson. And we can get that information out there, but I think voters already see through that stuff anyway, so. And then we also have the resources, and Lydia, you're frozen now, so I don't know if we can still hear you, but your video is locked up. And if you are gone, I will go to the Q&A and look at the thing myself, or Tiernan will.
Hey.
Tiernan's taken over.
Yes, I am jumping in. Hey, everyone. I'm Tiernan Donahue. I am Mark's National Finance Director. Thanks so much for being here. As sometimes happens, we had a few technical difficulties, but we work for an astronaut, so we are able to think on our feet. So, Mark, I have the next question from you, which is from Candice Williamson. Mark, in recent months, we've seen widespread calls for racial justice, criminal justice, and policing reform. What is your position on the Black Lives Matter movement?
Well, so Black Lives Matter, and we need criminal justice reform and policing reform, and we've needed it for a long time. You know, I think there's a lot that we can do and we should be doing. The Justice Department should be doing a better job. There's these things called consent decrees where they're basically policing the police departments. There needs to be independent investigations and better oversight. You know, body cameras on every police officer throughout the country. I mean, that's the data to decide if somebody is doing the job the way they should. Use of force should be evaluated at what point should certain techniques be allowed. You know, it's a you know, there's just a lot that can be done. I mean, police have received qualified immunity. So basically immunity from being prosecuted when they're found they've done something wrong. That doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not in legislation. It was something that was decided by the courts. Doesn't seem fair. So we need those reforms. But we also need a lot of reforms outside of just policing. I mean, education. The zip code you're born in shouldn't decide what kind of education you get in our country. It currently does to a big extent. So we should triple Title I funding and target those funds to, you know, areas that have schools that are inadequately funded. But so there's a lot that could be and should be done. There's legislation in the U.S. House, good legislation. There's legislation in the Senate, not so good. There are major issues that I have with it. NAACP and other human and civil rights organizations have found that legislation, the Republican bill, is not sufficient. Fantastic. So if elected, I'll work to do the best job I can to reform the system. And Lydia's back. Look at that.
And I'm going to hand it back to her because she's a much better moderator than I am.
So sorry about that. Little of our technical difficulties. But let's see, what was the question that was just asked? Get me back up to speed.
The police criminal justice.
Got it. Yep. right here. All right. Our next question comes from Judy Polnick. She asks, how big an issue is healthcare in your race for the US Senate, especially given the pandemic and the impact it will have on the number of people with pre-existing conditions?
It's the biggest issue, and it just got bigger because there's going to be a case heard on November 10th at the Supreme Court that could potentially overturn the Affordable Care Act. And people often think of the Affordable Care Act as that's the thing that gave people with pre-existing conditions protections. That's true, but it also did a lot of other things. It expanded Medicaid here in Arizona called Access. 460,000 individuals got health care because of the Affordable Care Act. If it goes away, they potentially lose their health care coverage. There are a lot of Americans that, they have serious health issues and they hit some arbitrary cap and their insurance company tells them, see you later. That went away when the Affordable Care Act was passed. There's no arbitrary lifetime cap. Insurance companies were also able to just kick people off because when they got sick and they say, oh, this person has cancer and it's going to be really expensive, they're kicked to the curb. So this issue just got highlighted with this opening on the Supreme Court because the ACA could go away, and it was already the major issue here, and it's just going to continue to be all the way to the election because it really affects people, and people lose their homes. They're bankrupted because of healthcare issues.
Right. Yeah. So many important things at stake here. And then Mark, I think this is the final question for you. Mark, a few people have been asking, what can we do to help support your campaign in these next 43 days?
Yeah, 43 days. There's still a lot that needs to be done. We still need to raise the resources to run the best race we possibly can because, like I said earlier, Senator McConnell's not going to want to lose twice in 2 years. Senator McSally is not going to want to lose twice in 2 years either. They're going to fight really hard, especially when you consider how Arizona fits into this whole nomination for a new Supreme Court justice. So they're going to fight all the way to the end. We've got to have those resources, but also help like on social media if you can. Sign up to make phone calls and send texts. That's available on our website. There's places you can sign up, and you could do that from home. That's incredibly important. We've got to have a strong get out the vote effort. That can win or lose you the election. So there's a lot that can be done. So thank you, everybody. I really enjoyed this. I know Gabby enjoyed it.
Yes.
It was great seeing Mayor Pete in Chasten, but this has been a lot of fun. And to everybody out there, thank you so much for the support. It means so much to us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Everybody, hope you have a good night.